I never thought I'd be the kind of guy to write something like this, but here I am. Married for 8 years, together for 10. I always believed our marriage was solid. Not perfect, because let's be honest, no relationship is, but stable enough that I didn't go to bed questioning it. Or at least, that's what I told myself. Looking back now, I realized the first cracks weren't loud. They were whispers. My wife started coming home later from work. At first, I brushed it off. Deadlines, team dinners, the usual excuses we all accept because we want to trust the person we love. But somewhere deep down, I felt it. A tension in her smile, a distance in her hug. I'd ask, "Rough day?" And she'd answer with this vague, rehearsed tone, like she was reading lines from a script. The truth? I ignored it because worrying felt heavier than pretending everything was fine. But here's the thing. When you ignore whispers, they eventually turn into shouts. The moment everything shifted wasn't some dramatic Hollywood scene with lipstick on a collar or a mysterious text message lighting up her phone. It was actually way more ordinary, and maybe that's why it hit harder. One evening, she came home unusually cheerful, like glowing. I remember thinking, wow, she hasn't smiled like that in months. For a second, I felt hopeful. Maybe she was just stressed. Maybe things were finally turning around. But then I noticed something. She wasn't glowing at me. Her happiness didn't spill into our conversations, or our dinner, or the silence that followed. It was like she had already spent her best self somewhere else and left me with the leftovers. That night, lying in bed beside her, I realized I'd been practicing the art of worrying less in the worst way by ignoring the truth, by convincing myself that silence meant safety. And that realization? It kept me awake until the sun came up. The confirmation didn't come in a grand confession. It came in a mistake. People always say the truth slips out when you're not paying attention, and that's exactly what happened. She was in the kitchen, laughing at something on her phone. I walked in and asked, "What's so funny?" She froze for a split second, just long enough for my stomach to drop. Then she said, "Oh, just a meme Sarah sent me." But here's the kicker. Sarah had moved to another city months ago, and my wife barely spoke to her anymore. My brain wanted to believe her, but my gut screamed otherwise. Later that night, when she fell asleep, I picked up her phone. I'd never done that before, and my hands were literally shaking. And there it was. Not Sarah, not even close. A man, someone from her office. Messages full of inside jokes, emojis, and little comments like, "Wish you were here instead." I can't even explain the rush of heat I felt. My chest tightened, my ears buzzed, and my hands felt like they weren't even mine anymore. That was the exact second I knew. Our marriage wasn't just cracked. It was broken. I didn't confront her right away. You'd think that's what any sane person would do. Storm into the living room, throw the phone on the table, and demand answers. But I just froze. Instead, I went into the bathroom, locked the door, and sat on the floor staring at the tiles. My chest hurt like I'd been punched. I kept whispering to myself, "This isn't real. This can't be real." The strangest part? My first feeling wasn't even anger, it was shame. Like somehow I had failed. That if I'd been more interesting, more fun, more whatever, she wouldn't need someone else. I know it's irrational, but betrayal rewires your brain in weird ways. That night, lying next to her, I felt like I was sharing a bed with a stranger. Every time she shifted, I flinched. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't even breathe normally. It wasn't just my marriage shaking. It felt like my entire identity was crumbling. The next morning, I thought I'd finally confront her. I even rehearsed it in the mirror. Calm, controlled, not yelling, just asking, "Who is he? How long has this been going on?" But when she walked into the kitchen, hair messy, wearing the same oversized t-shirt she's had since college, I froze again. For a moment, I saw the woman I married. The one who made pancakes on Sundays and laughed at my terrible impressions. And I couldn't get the words out. Instead, I asked something stupid like, "Want coffee?" And she smiled, said sure, and kissed me on the cheek. That kiss felt like poison. The irony? She probably thought everything was normal. But inside me, it was like a hurricane. Rage, fear, sadness, all slamming into each other. I realized then that confronting her wasn't just about getting the truth. It was about whether I was ready to face the answer. And at that moment, I wasn't. When you don't confront, you investigate. That's just human nature. And man, I went full private detective mode. I started noticing her patterns. When she left the room to take calls, when her texts made her smile in ways my words hadn't for months, when she suddenly worked late, but her makeup was just a little too perfect for the office. I even tracked the mileage on her car once. She said she was going straight to work, but the odometer told me she'd taken a little detour. I didn't follow her. I couldn't bring myself to do it, but I sat in my own living room piecing together the puzzle like a madman. Every discovery didn't feel like proof. It felt like a stab. But here's the twisted part. A part of me felt relieved. Because now I wasn't crazy. I wasn't just worrying too much. The whispers I'd ignored had turned into hard evidence, and my gut had been right all along. Still, knowing doesn't mean healing. If anything, it hurt worse. The breaking point came on a Friday night. She texted me around 6 p.m., saying she'd be working late. Classic. By then, I didn't even flinch. I just nodded at my phone and muttered, "Sure you are." But this time, I decided to test it. I called her office line around 8:30. No answer. I called again at 9 o'clock. Still nothing. Finally, I called the front desk. The receptionist, sounding half asleep, told me the office had closed at 6:30. That was it. The confirmation I didn't even want anymore. When she walked in at 11 o'clock, hair-styled, smelling like perfume she never wore around me, I couldn't fake it any longer. I asked, "How was work?" in the most neutral voice I could manage. She looked me straight in the eye and said, "Exhausting. You wouldn't believe the deadline we're under." That was the moment I realized. She wasn't just cheating. She was lying to my face without blinking. And weirdly enough, that hurt more than the affair itself. I couldn't hold it in anymore. The words just spilled out. "Stop lying to me," I said. My voice cracked, but it was louder than I'd expected. She froze in the doorway, clutching her bag like it was a shield. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her tone sharp, defensive. And then I said his name. I'll never forget the way her face dropped. It was like watching a mask slip right off in real time. She didn't even bother pretending after that, just stood there, silent, guilty written all over her. I felt my entire body shaking. My hands, my chest, even my voice. Do you know what it's like to lie awake every night, wondering what I did wrong? Wondering why my wife would rather smile at her phone than at me. She started crying, saying things like, "It just happened," and "I didn't mean for it to go this far." But the damage was already done. Those words didn't soothe me. They made me feel smaller, like I was some placeholder in my own marriage. That night wasn't just a fight. It was an earthquake that leveled everything we'd built together. The house felt like a war zone after that night. Not in the sense of yelling or broken dishes. No, it was worse. It was the silence. Thick, heavy, suffocating silence. I slept on the couch. She stayed in the bedroom. Every time I walked past the door, I imagined her texting him, replaying their little jokes, maybe even planning when to see him again. My brain wouldn't stop feeding me images I didn't want. I cycled through every emotion: rage, grief, shame, numbness. I'd be furious one second, punching the couch cushion, and the next second I'd collapse into tears, wondering how the woman who once wrote me love notes could now write the same kind to someone else. But the strangest part? Amid all that chaos, I felt clarity, like the fog of pretending was finally gone. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overthinking. The whispers had become shouts, and now they were deafening. That clarity didn't fix the pain, but it did give me one gift: the realization that something had to change, and I couldn't keep living in limbo. After a week of silence and sleepless nights, I reached a breaking point, not of anger, but of exhaustion. Worrying had eaten me alive for months. Pretending had drained me even more. So one morning, I sat across from her at the kitchen table and simply said, "I can't do this anymore." My voice was calm, almost too calm. She looked startled, like she'd expected another fight, another round of accusations. But there was nothing left to argue about. I told her I needed space. Not just physically, but mentally. that I couldn't spend my life being planned B while she gave her best self to someone else. And for the first time, I saw something in her face that almost looked like fear. Maybe she thought I'd never actually walk away. I packed a bag, left the house, and checked into a cheap hotel for the weekend. It wasn't glamorous, but for the first time in months, I slept without listening for her lies in the dark. That was the beginning of my decision, not to fight for her, not to chase the why, but to fight for myself. The first few days alone were strange, peaceful in a way I hadn't expected, but also painfully empty. No laughter, no arguments, no shared routines, just me and my thoughts. At first, I replayed everything, her smiles, her lies, every little signal I'd ignored. But slowly, I started noticing things I'd forgotten. My own hobbies, my friends, even the quiet joy of making coffee exactly how I like it without someone criticizing the foam. I went for long walks, journaled my feelings, and started listening to podcasts about mindfulness and self-improvement. It was like rediscovering myself in pieces I didn't even know I'd lost. And here's the funny part. The more I focused on me, the less I worried. The art of worrying less wasn't about ignoring reality. It was about taking control of what I could control, my actions, my emotions, my life. For the first time in years, I felt like I was slowly coming back to myself. Just when I thought I was getting used to this new rhythm, life threw me a curveball. One evening, a mutual friend called me, someone I hadn't spoken to in years, and casually mentioned that my wife had admitted to the affair at her office. Not to me, not privately, but in a conversation with coworkers. I felt a weird mix of anger and relief. Anger because she had humiliated herself and our marriage publicly, and relief because finally, there was no more pretending. The truth was out, undeniable, and I didn't have to chase it anymore. But here's the kicker. Instead of hating her more, I realized I was starting to feel pity. Not sympathy for what she did, but for how little she seemed to understand about love, loyalty, and self-respect. And that was a strange, freeing emotion. I wasn't trapped by bitterness anymore. That night, I poured myself a glass of whiskey, looked at the ceiling, and smiled. Weirdly, for the first time in months, I felt lighter. By now, I had spent weeks alone, reflecting, reading, journaling, and talking to a therapist I'd ignored for years. Slowly, I started to understand something important. Worrying less doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop letting other people's choices control your emotions. I realized I had spent so much energy trying to read her mind, predict her actions, and fix something that wasn't mine to fix. Once I let go of that, a strange thing happened. I started to feel free. Free to focus on my own happiness, my own growth, and my own future. I even started reconnecting with old friends and hobbies I'd abandoned. I went hiking alone, tried cooking new recipes, and even laughed again, honestly and deeply, without the shadow of suspicion hanging over me. For the first time in years, I wasn't just surviving, I was living. Acceptance didn't hit me like a lightning bolt. It was quieter, like dawn breaking slowly over a dark city. I stopped waiting for her to apologize. I stopped imagining confrontations or rehearsing arguments in my head. I stopped letting her actions dictate my mood. Instead, I focused on myself, my goals, my health, my friendships. I even started dating again, cautiously, not to replace her, but to remind myself that love wasn't just pain and betrayal. The surprising part? I didn't feel bitterness anymore. I felt gratitude. Gratitude for the clarity, for the lessons, and for the chance to rediscover who I truly am. I realized that worrying less isn't about ignoring problems. It's about choosing which battles are worth your energy and which ones you leave behind. I still feel sadness sometimes, of course. Human emotions don't vanish overnight, but I've learned how to carry it without letting it crush me. Looking back, I never expected to find clarity or peace in the middle of betrayal. But here I am, months later, sitting in my apartment, sipping coffee, feeling a strange mix of pride and relief. Pride because I didn't let the situation destroy me, and relief because I finally understand the art of worrying less. If there's one thing I'd tell anyone going through something similar, it's this: you can't control other people, and you can't predict their choices. What you can control is how you respond, how you protect your own heart, and how you choose to grow from the pain. Life doesn't stop when someone betrays you. It's just a brutal reminder to prioritize yourself. Trust your instincts, honor your emotions, and let go of what isn't yours to carry. That's how you start worrying less. That's how you start living again. And honestly, it feels like freedom.